So whether that be horizontal. What's shaking bacon? I'm Joni Simon. Welcome to my studio. This is where I do food photography. So if you are into that, you go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And today is a video specifically for anybody who has ever edited a photo, you were super proud of it, you thought it was beautiful, and then you went to go post it somewhere online only to see that like once it showed up on Facebook or Instagram or wherever, it just didn't look as good. It wasn't quite as crispy. It was just sad. And so if that has ever happened to you, then you want to watch this video, you want to stick around. So for today's tutorial, I'm using some images that I shot of this asparagus. I really wanted something super moody and just like, oh, like gritty and in there. And so I've got some asparagus that I grilled along with some lemon, and you can see I've got this set up here. I've got plenty of the black foam core, of course, kind of blocking off the sides so that I get that nice little strip of light from the upper right to the lower left. And then in terms of lighting, I have got my diffuser going in the upper right corner, and then I have a speed light set up behind that. Now, in terms of the settings, I've got those right here on the screen, so you can kind of see my process and how I made this picture happen. So the key to ensuring that your image looks as good online as it does when you export it from Lightroom is making sure that those export settings are keyed up specifically for the platform where you are putting those images. So what I want to walk you through are the 5 different ways that I am typically exporting images, you know, the 5 different platforms, the blog, the clients, Facebook, Instagram story, Instagram feed, and what are the optimal settings on export in order to ensure that those images are crispy and look perfect for that intended platform. And of course, because I'm all about the time savings, there's also a way to set a preset for each of these on export so you don't have to go monkeying around with the settings every single time. So let's do it together. All right, so first way that I export images is specifically for a client. So I'm doing a shoot for somebody and I'm exporting the images. They of course want the high resolution, full quality. So let's go ahead and walk through how we do that. All right, so we've got our shot of asparagus here and I have this image selected specifically and I am going to export it. You can go up to File and then drop down to Export, which will then prompt up the box there. Or if you like the shortcut keys like I do, you do the Shift Command E, and then again will also prompt you with the box. And then what we're going to do is fill in all of these boxes in order to make sure that we've got the proper settings for our high resolution images for our client. All right, so in terms of where we're exporting it to, in this case, I'm exporting it to my hard drive. And then we go down into the export location. Now this is something that is just a word to the wise. If you are going to get into the world of Lightroom, I highly, highly recommend you get very intimately acquainted with your filing system. And you know where all your files and folders are and how you organize all of that. That is really very much a personal thing. I will link some helpful tutorials below in case you're having troubles with that. But as long as you know where your files are going, then you can go ahead and select where to export to. So I, for my own system and how I like to organize myself, I export things to the same folder as the original photo so that I have that raw file, and then inside of that raw file I have a subfolder, which is where we can put in a subfolder right there. Click that on. And then I typically will name that whatever that final image set is going to be. So in this case, this is asparagus. So I'm going to name it grilled asparagus. And then these are the final images. So it's going to name a subfolder inside the asparagus folder so I know where all of the final images live as well as all the raw files. So now this existing files area, this is super helpful, making sure again that we're keeping everything nice and neat and clean and we're not copying over anything. So existing files means that if in the event that we hit the export button, which we will do in a minute, if there is another file already with the same name as this image that we are exporting right now, that we should do something about it. And so you can either ask what to do, choose a new name for the exported file, overwrite without warning, which I would not recommend, skip, which I would not recommend either. Personally, I just have it ask me what to do so that it's prompting me and I'm going, oh wait, there's something that's already named this. Maybe I need to go in and see what's going on here and clean up my filing. All right, so next up is the file naming. And again, this has to do with how do you keep your images organized? How do you like to find things? I personally like to rename all of the actual images based on what that shoot is. So again, this is grilled asparagus. So if I rename to a custom name so that that is going to replace whatever that original image file name was, right? Because when it comes right out of the camera, it's named some sort of gobbledygook of letters and numbers like IMG283.cr2 or whatever the naming is that your camera has assigned to that. I want to overwrite that and have that be asparagus and then whatever number that is in that gallery. So for example, this is the first image we're exporting. We're going to give that a custom name and a sequence. So I'm going to name that grilled asparagus. And then we're going to start with the number 1. Now, if I was exporting multiple images, maybe say 5 images, then it would start at number 1, and then the next image would be number 2. The next one after that would be 3, but they would all still be named grilled asparagus because that helps keep me organized. All right, so now it comes to the file settings, and I would say 99.9% of the clients that I am delivering images to, images that I am exporting, I'm taking them from RAW and exporting them into JPEG so that we can upload them, we can send them, we can do all sorts of things with them once they are in JPEG format. So again, depending on what is your intended purpose, but for the most part, JPEG is what's going to apply there. And then in terms of the quality, we're going to keep that at 100%. We want this to be the full image size. We are not worried about making this smaller or compressing it. We're going to do that a little bit later on the other images. So for now, we leave that at 100%. So next up is color space. And admittedly, this is a complex topic, but one that is very worthwhile to read up on. I've got some helpful articles linked below that you can read all about it, educate yourself. But really what this is getting at is the intended colors that you have selected in your editing process, ensuring that those come across as true and the same wherever these images are going. So if you're like me and the majority of your images live online in a digital space, that those are then being viewed on an sRGB screen, so that the screen that is viewing these images is the same as we have exported these images. Those colors will read the same. So in this case, I'm going to select sRGB as opposed to what you'll hear a lot of times is Adobe RGB, which is more typically used in print scenarios. But again, I've got some helpful articles linked below so you can read up on it. And next up is image sizing, and we already cropped the image to whatever specifications the client had requested, right, when we were doing all the cropping and all the aspect ratios in the actual editing process. And so now at this point, we don't want to alter this. We want this to be a full-sized image. We don't want to limit it at all. We don't want to resize it. So we're going to leave that alone. And then in terms of resolution, this is kind of a little tricky thing. You think, oh, okay, bigger is better, smaller is worse. But actually, this particular setting for resolution only applies if you're printing these images. So if, say, for example, we're using this image online on a blog and we set this at 1 pixel per inch, or we set it at 900 pixels per inch, it wouldn't matter. It's not going to impact the way that that image looks on a screen. It's only going to apply specifically if we are printing this image. So for me, I just typically leave this at 300 because it don't matter. All right, and next is the metadata. And we have previously discussed why metadata is super duper important. Now, if you missed that, I will link that down below as well as right up here so you can go grab that video. But you want to make sure that you have your metadata embedded in that image for copyright purposes, so that we know that whose image this belongs to, so nobody can rip it off, nobody can steal it, because that information is burned into that file. However, one box that I do click is remove the location information, because I don't necessarily want anybody showing up at my doorstep saying, hi, I've got your picture. And then watermarking, I don't personally watermark my images, I just stick to the metadata, but if you do, you can go ahead and select there. And then after export, I do nothing, I just let it do its thing. All right, so at this point, now what we have done is we have built out all of the settings for an export that every single time I'm exporting for a client, I want these settings to be the same. So we can set a preset, which is super duper easy. It's this little area over here to the left. You just hit add, and then we're gonna name this preset. So I name this as my client preset, and I'm gonna keep that under the user presets folder, create. And so now anytime that I am exporting an image, when I come up to this export box, then I just hit client and it will make sure all those settings are exactly the same. It's a nice little shortcut. And then from there, we just hit the export button, and then you can see it will show you the progress of your export up here in the upper left. So if you're like, hey, where is my file? You can see it's still thinking, it's still doing its thing. Let it do its thing. It's a big file. Give it time. So then if I go into my asparagus folder, you can see these are all the raw images, right? We go into that grilled asparagus final subfolder that we created, and here is the image we just exported. So that is how I export images that are intended for a client, those beautiful high resolution images. But now there are plenty of times that I need to put a picture on a website. So this is applicable for those of you who are bloggers or anybody else who's creating a website, that you want to make sure you're not using high resolution images, because those are really large files and they take a long time to load. So when we talk about the images loading on a website, it's going to really slow down that website. And anybody who knows anything about search engine optimization, you want a fast load time on that page. And so the way to make that happen quicker, of course, with any sort of image intensive posts or pages, is by making sure those images are smaller, that they're not quite as large. But of course, we want them to be big enough that they still look pretty. They're not all pixelated. We want a nice resolution. So it's about finding that perfect middle ground. So I want to walk you through how I set this specifically anytime I am exporting for my blog. And so you can export multiple images at the same time. If you go down here to the bottom and you see I've got this one highlighted, if you hit Shift and then you hit another image in that series, that it will highlight all of those images. You can take all 4 of them. In this case, I'm just going to take these 3 and I'm going to export them again. So Command Shift E or File Export. It's going to open up that export dialog box for us once again. And so now we're going to build out all the settings very similar to how we did for the client, but there's going to be just a couple little changes to make sure that we can make this a smaller file size. And now one note is every time you export images, you are going to want to make sure to change the subfolder and the custom name of these images, because of course, depending on the recipe, depending on the client, all the images, that's always going to change. So we go ahead and select the names. Again, I'm going to keep grilled asparagus final as that subfolder, keep naming these images grilled asparagus. But now we go into the file settings and this is where things are going to change. Now we're going to keep it in JPEG because I'm uploading these to WordPress. But now in terms of quality, I don't need these at 100%. I'm going to take it down to 80. I find that is like that perfect threshold of still a really nice quality image, that it's really nice resolution, but at the same time, it's not so gigantic and it's much easier to load on the page. And then of course, this is a website, so we're going to keep it in sRGB. And
next is image sizing, and we definitely want to make some changes here because we want to make that image smaller by limiting the number of pixels it has on each edge. And so what I do, purely based on input I received from somebody who does SEO related to my specific website, the recommendation was to resize to fit it based on the long edge and to limit that to 1,000 pixels. So that's 1,000 pixels on the long side, whether that is horizontal or vertical. But by no means am I an SEO expert. So if you have any input related to the sizing of the images for websites, feel free to leave those in the comments below.
And then everything else stays the same. But before we leave, we want to make sure to add this as a preset. So I'm going to change this to blog under user presets. Create, and we are good to go. Now anytime we need to export to the blog, I've already got it set. All right, so now we are on the home stretch and we're jumping into then when we're placing these on social media. And so darn Facebook and Instagram, they love to take the images that we post and compress them down, which is why if you take a really beautiful high resolution image and you throw it on Facebook and you're like, that looks like crap. It's because that Facebook has done the compression for you and they didn't do a very good job at it. So what we want to do is resize the image so that it is minimal compression going on the Facebook side so that it looks as true to that original picture as possible. All right, so we've got our asparagus. We're going to open up that export dialog once again. We're getting really good at this. And so you're going to name it, of course, depending on where this is going. Sometimes so that it helps keep me organized, especially when I'm exporting multiple images at the same time, I will add custom text to this, or I will put this in a social media subfolder. You can again change the naming so that it's helpful for you to figure out which image is which, because I can theoretically have the same image in 3 or 4 different versions. So just so you know where it's going. So in this case, I'm going to do grilled asparagus Facebook. And then start with number 1. We're going to keep that again as a JPEG, but in terms of quality, I'm going to take it to 85%. So I find that 85 is that perfect threshold so that it's still a high quality image, that it's really nice and crisp, but at the same time that Facebook isn't compressing it and making it look kind of fuzzy and muddy. And then image sizing, things change again here. So we're going to resize to fit this time the long edge. So whether this is horizontal or vertical, we want that long edge to be 2048. That is optimal for Facebook. That's what Facebook wants. So that's what we are going to give Facebook. And then everything else stays the same. But again, set our preset by hit add, Facebook, user presets, and create. So now we are ready to export that, post it to Facebook, and it will look just as beautiful as it does on our computer on Facebook. All right, now everybody's favorite topic, Instagram. So now what we want to do, as we talked about in last week's video, if you missed that, I've got that linked right up here so you can go grab that. We want to first make sure that this is cropped to the aspect ratio of 4:5 for the Instagram feed. And we're talking about the feed, not the story. We'll get into the story in just a minute. So this is just the feed, the grid, the world that we live on Instagram. And so you want to go ahead and make sure that that is cropped to the 4:5. So you go into the crop and straighten tool right here, select that 4:5, readjust your image. If you need to do the composition things, the overlays, again, check last week's video. We've got that cropped, and now we're ready to export it. And so we again do our Command-Shift-E, open up that dialog box, and we are going to make this then grilled asparagus IG. Now in terms of quality, and now this is a really helpful tip that I learned from my buddy Travis Transient. If you've not checked out his channel, you definitely gotta go check it out. I've got it linked up here, down below, all the places where you can find the links. For the quality, we're gonna set that at 72%. That is gonna be that break-even point, again, for a really nice quality image, but so that Instagram isn't gonna compress the heck out of it. And we're gonna keep that in the sRGB color space, again, is something that is going on the web, or more importantly, our phones, right? And then image sizing, again, we're focused on the long edge, and in this case, for the beautiful world of Instagram, because they are tall images, the long edge, we always want that to be 1080. That will be optimal and perfect for Instagram. Everything else stays the same. Let's add that preset, Instagram feed. All right, and last but certainly not least, my favorite place to hang out is the Instagram stories. And so for this, we want to make sure that that aspect ratio is set by 16:9. That is that nice, tall, wide, and skinny, so that it fits on our phones. And I'm gonna go ahead and adjust that crop. That looks good. And now we are ready to export it, right? So we go into Command-Shift-E to open up that export dialog box. I'm gonna go ahead and change this to Instagram story here so that I know this is specifically the story and not the feed. And then I'm gonna go down into the file settings. I leave that all the same, but what I do change is the image sizing. Instead of 1080, I'm gonna change that to 1920. Again, the long edge of the resolution of the actual phone. And then from there, we add our user preset to Instagram story, create, export, and then we've got a wonderful collection of the images that we need, all perfectly optimized for the places where we're gonna put them. Now, of course, there are tons of different situations where you might need to resize this for, you know, a header image or a YouTube banner. I mean, there's a million different resolutions and sizes and optimal ways to do things, but certainly these are the top 5 ways that I am typically exporting images. So hopefully this was helpful to you. Hopefully this is giving you some helpful information for the next time you are exporting images. Certainly, if you learned a thing or two, or you're exporting images yourself, I would love to see those images. You can tag me over on Instagram. I am at The Bite Shot. I'll give you those 2 thumbs up. But with that, I hope you have a fantastic day. I hope you export images like a boss and you get those beautiful crispy images. And I hope you stay out of trouble. And I'll see you soon, okay? Bye.
Tall, but not too tall.
What are you doing?
What's our child doing? Uh-oh.
It's like, oh, hi. You want to come in, Calvin?
Come on in.
Do you need a chair?
Do I need a chair?
Thanks for helping with this.
Ryan's
Ryan's got the words. Ryan's got all the words. I was like, the camera's here. No, the camera's right there. Yeah. Calvin, come here. Is this the door? Is this the door? Is this the door that will take us in? No? Okay.